Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
USP Program and Drones. I'm LARPing and they can't do much to me now anyway. From 2012 to 2023, I worked in naval intelligence, focusing on advanced underwater detection systems as part of an unidentified submerged phenomena program. Our work involved close collaboration with the Department of Defense and leading defense contractors, whose names you can likely guess. The program's objective was to investigate anomalous underwater activity in specific areas of interest. My recruitment came after earning a PhD in oceanographic engineering, and my role was to analyze sensor data and identify patterns in these phenomena. I'll keep this as concise as possible. I'd like to start by saying that the drones we've been seeing aren't US experiments, Chinese tech, or extraterrestrial. The objects we were seeing are from Earth, and while we're not entirely sure what they are, we know where they come from. The objects we see emerge from subterranean and submarine exit points. During my time in the USP program, my team analyzed data from nuclear subfleets equipped with next-gen quantum sonar arrays. These tracked objects emerging from and returning to depths far below our sub's crush depth, about 2,400 feet. Simply put, their movement defied physics. I'm talking about vertical ascents and descents at 75, 90 degrees with constant velocity, no cavitation, and no acoustic signature. By 2014, we identified consistent emergence points we called threshold points. These weren't random. Clusters of these objects always seem to emerge in the Puerto Rico Trench, off California's continental shelf, and the East Pacific Rise. The objects' physical properties are quite honestly terrifying, as they can physically alter their structure and manipulate electromagnetic fields to mimic real aircraft, replicating their shape, motion, and reflective properties. However, our quantum sonar arrays consistently reveal their true, unchanging forms, suggesting the transformation is either superficial or operates by mechanisms we don't understand. You wouldn't believe how much activity has ramped up over the past 2 years. By mid-2023, the whole situation got so tense that my access to key data was locked down almost overnight. It wasn't subtle. My higher-ups were clearly scared. Everything became need to know, and apparently, I didn't need to know anymore. When they started pulling senior analysts from the program and stonewalling me from anything remotely relevant, it was obvious the walls were closing in. That's when I decided it was time to leave. The recent wave of whistleblowers you'll be seeing and incidents like the Cybertruck bomber are controlled disclosure. It's all part of a calculated effort to muddy the waters and keep people chasing shadows while something much bigger is unfolding. These objects aren't extraterrestrial, and they're not some top-secret military tech. Our theory is that they've been here far longer than we have, and whatever they're doing, it's ramping up fast. Our final pattern analysis before the data lockdown showed an exponential increase in emergence events. The trend wasn't just alarming, it pointed toward a critical threshold. Also, we're entirely certain they aren't just buzzing around aimlessly. They're systematically mapping and surveying infrastructure, military installations, population hubs. They're covering everything, and they're doing it while blending in perfectly. They could look like a drone, an airliner, or who knows what else, but under the surface, there's something entirely different. Did your office work with the NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, during all of this? Yes. We had ongoing collaborations with PML, Pacific Marine Environmental Laboratory, particularly their ocean exploration program. They provided data and environmental monitoring that helped us establish baseline acoustic signatures to filter out natural phenomena. They were a pain in the ass. Any activity near Karlat Yam? If you're referring to Kiryat Yam, I'm not sure about the spelling you used. We didn't have direct monitoring stations in the Mediterranean. At least I was never aware of these and only focused on the areas I already mentioned. The Mediterranean's average depth of around 1,500 meters doesn't provide the conditions we typically associated with threshold points. If Euros and Africans see these objects, it's because they went from the Atlantic threshold points, particularly from the Puerto Rico Trench vector, and moved eastward across the ocean. What were the true forms you saw on sonar? We consistently observed two configurations. The most common was an oblong spheroid, exactly like the tic-tac shape that gets thrown around a lot. The other form was perfectly spherical, usually 5-8 meters in diameter. Regardless of what they appeared to be visually, drones, aircraft, etc., the quantum acoustic signature always showed one of these two base forms. The sphere configuration was more common during deep-water operations, while the tic-tac shape was prevalent during surface-to-air transitions. Any biological effects reported near the exit points? Changes in sea life behavior? Marine life doesn't notice these things. Our bio team used to joke about this. It's pretty wild when you think about it. Even our quietest subs send marine life scattering, but these objects might as well be part of the coral.
Op triggered them keck. But to be fair, got any actual proof? Any details about yourself or the project that might give me a reason to believe this?
I gave the general timeline, my role, and my background. The locations and tech specs I mentioned are verifiable by anyone with any proper knowledge. I'd suggest looking at the public NOAA bathymetric data for the threshold points I mentioned. Pay attention to anomalous readings around the Puerto Rico Trench's western slope, particularly between 2020 to 2022. The data's public. They just don't advertise what they're actually recording. I'm not going to dox myself further or drop specific details that could identify people close to me. Summer 2015 Puerto Rico shelf. Emergence of small fast unit that flew over the East US. This very much tracks. The Pentagon videos they confirmed in 2020 were from that 2014 to 2015 activity spike. It was cool seeing them finally acknowledge footage we'd been analyzing years before. The release of those videos sparked huge internal fights. You had some officials pushing for disclosure, other branches fighting to keep everything classified, and some just freelancing their own agenda. My team thought we were finally getting somewhere, but instead it just exposed how fractured the whole system is. Different offices are either fighting over control or actively undermining each other. We're cooked. Any idea why they are putting small devices into people? The implant phenomenon is real. Never heard anyone talk about this.
I'm not reading all that. I already know that they are ancient alien probes and they can replicate itself. That is the only explanation that makes sense. An advanced civilization will inevitably send probes all over the universe to search for stuff. And elaborating on this, their goal is to find these interesting planets with resources or life support conditions and report back to the nearest outpost. So they've sent a probe back with a report thousands of years ago, and now their goal is just to monitor and protect the planet and its resources until more probes and perhaps even non-human intelligence life forms arrive here. If we are about to nuke the planet down, they will interfere.
There's no evidence to suggest they aren't from our planet, but you're not entirely wrong. These objects show specific interest in our infrastructure and population centers. We're certain they're mapping human activity specifically, and not just general planetary resources. What's going on in New Jersey is unprecedented. Everything else is pure speculation. Do you think it could be related to Earth's pole shift? No. The Earth's magnetic pole shift is like a very slow-moving compass needle. We actually studied this possibility extensively because the objects we tracked could manipulate electromagnetic fields. Imagine you're watching birds migrate. If they were following Earth's magnetic field, like actual birds do, you'd see gradual changes in their patterns matching the pole's movement. But these objects followed completely different rules. They created their own magnetic disturbances, kind of like how a magnet can temporarily override your compass. Why would these things even care about us now if they're some ancient Earth species? Our theory was that they're tired of us messing with their shit, quite honestly. We always assumed they're peaceful, or else humanity wouldn't have thrived for this long. However, we've basically industrialized every corner of their native environment. Deep sea mining, submarine cables, sonar networks, oil rigs. We're literally building infrastructure right on top of their threshold points. Plus, our self-destructive behavior, nukes, puts them at high risk. That's why there's been so much more activity in the last 80 years. What's the point of mimicking planes? They clearly don't want direct interaction with us, and the mimicking seems to be an evasion tactic. Numbers. By late 2022, we had around 40 emergences per month. Back in 2014, only 10, 20. But the worst part wasn't the numbers. It was seeing multiple threshold points activate at once, which had never happened before. Last projection before I lost access showed 100+ monthly events by end of 2023. Given what's happening now, especially in New Jersey, we're probably looking at 10+ events daily. Way beyond anything we modeled. Did any other nations track this shit? Of course. That's actually part of why keeping this contained is impossible. Russian deep-sea research vessels were all over the East Pacific Rise threshold points. They have better deep water capabilities than most people realize. The Chinese aren't dumb about this either. The funny part is we'd occasionally get sanitized intelligence reports of them tracking the exact same phenomena, but everyone played dumb in international waters. Picture these 3 countries all following the same objects while pretending they're just doing routine patrols. It's ridiculous. The Chinese especially ramped up their deep-sea monitoring after 2019. Look up their underwater sensor network expansion.
When is the critical threshold?
If you're asking for a specific date, I can't give you one. That's not how it works. Our models showed emergence events increasing exponentially, but we lost access to the data before pinpointing when it could peak, and that prediction could be incorrect. What I can tell you is that the rate of increase we were seeing by mid-2023 was well beyond our worst-case projections from 2019. Think of it like watching a pot about to boil. You can see the bubbles forming faster and faster, but you can't predict the exact moment it'll boil over. All I know is we're seeing way more activity now than any of our models predicted we would, and nobody knows their end goal.
If you're not LARPing, which I actually believe you aren't, I think we might be fucked. I watched a video about how an invasion would go down that scared the shit out of me. The glowy from the thing basically said we'd have no clue what was coming until it was happening, and then it'd be extremely violent and very quick.
In all the data we collected, there wasn't a single aggressive action. They're capable of incredible things, but they've never shown hostile intent. If they wanted violence, we wouldn't stand a chance. Something that can alter their structure, manipulate electromagnetic fields, and move through water like it's air. We'd be done in hours. What we observed was more like territorial behavior, like they're responding to us encroaching on their space. They're aware of our nuclear capabilities. That's probably humanity's only real deterrent. I guess they understand that any overt action risks a nuclear response from us that would poison their environment as much as ours. But that's just my analysis based on the data. I'm not going to pretend I know their intentions. Threshold points aren't physical structures or holes. That's what made them hard to study. They're more like zones where normal physics starts acting up. UUVs could get within about 600 meters before their navigation systems would start going haywire. Compasses spinning, depth sensors showing impossible readings, that sort of thing. Lost quite a few Remus units trying to get closer. The best imagery we got was from multi-beam sonar mapping. You'd see these perfectly circular areas maybe 50 meters in diameter, where the return signals just didn't make sense. Like the bathymetry would show normal seafloor topology, then this completely smooth disk where all our instruments failed to get coherent readings, almost like a blind spot in the data. Who do you find to be the most credible and genuine? Most of them are working with fragments of information, and some are definitely spinning narratives for profit or attention. The ones talking about bodies, exotic materials, and crash retrievals are missing the point entirely. These things don't crash. There are no retrievals.
Metallic orbs like PIC-related are exactly what I saw from an airplane in 2023. Right around the California-Nevada border, flying from Calgary to LA. Weird thing is, I know there was more than one, but can't give a definite answer as to how many. I'd say 3 to 5, but I don't know why. I can't give a definite answer. I noticed them, looked for a couple of seconds, pulled out my phone, looked at the screen to unlock it, looked back out the window, and they were quite a ways ahead and just disappeared into the clouds. Trust me, bro.
The idea of them camouflaging as drones and planes makes me uncomfortable. What if they can also mimic humans and other things? What if cryptids and entities like Bigfoot and Jersey Devil are these little dudes cosplaying?
One of our techs actually had this running joke about our branch director being one of them, because the guy never seemed to blink and had this weird way of moving. We never saw any evidence they could mimic anything except aircraft. Not saying they couldn't do different things, they probably can. But signatures were always consistent with those two forms I mentioned, the sphere and tic-tac shapes. Again, fragments of info are out there. So is the reality of what's happening. It's right in front of everyone. People just keep looking for aliens when they should be looking elsewhere. That's all.
Does this mean the guy who said that creatures live in these plasma voids under the ocean wasn't LARPing? I forget what he called the substance they lived inside, but he said it occurred under great pressures. And they've lived in these plasma oceans underneath us for thousands of years. I forget what people called them, but it's something like doppelnay. He said we developed nukes, which is tech they didn't have, and they developed anti-gravity. And they wanted us to stop messing with their ecosystem. That's why they emerged. And a huge war is brewing, but they agreed to peace for a few decades with them. Presumably they are humanoid, but with aquatic features?
Never heard of such a theory. The objects we tracked were solid, structured craft with forms under quantum sonar. As for humanoid entities, I never saw evidence of that. The objects showed signs of intelligence in their behavior patterns, but we never got close enough to determine who or what was operating them. Speculation about their true nature was heavily discouraged in the program. Our team joked about it here and there, but never around the higher-ups. We did our job and that was it.
What the fuck is quantum sonar?
2 years ago, there was an article linked below if you want to read the full thing, which stated, "Quantum sensors use the smallest amounts of energy and matter to detect and measure tiny changes in time, gravity, temperature, pressure, rotation, acceleration, frequency, and magnetic and electric fields." They've been commercially available in various forms for more than a half-century. Think of a magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI machine, which tracks flips in the magnetic spin of individual hydrogen atoms to peer into a body. But recent progress in the field suggests that such sensors will soon bring a revolution in measurement and signals intelligence, possibly by making it far easier to detect submarines, spacecraft, and underground facilities. The technology is here. It is already used for advanced aerospace detection, SIGINT. The wheels are turning to gain an advanced detection capabilities intelligence apparatus, DCIA, which was being actively tested during Russia's 2022 war on Ukraine, and it saw enormous gains. I was a 35 in signals intelligence analyst at the time.
I feel like at any second the entire planet could be swarmed with billions of these things, and be wiped out in a second. What the hell else would they be planning? Also, what's the possibility there's been ET contact, and this is something totally different as well? I found some of the crash retrieval stories to seem believable.
If you saw the data we saw, that feeling of dread would be in your head 24/7, but eventually you just learn to live with this reality. There's not much we can do. Whether other phenomena exist alongside what I saw is outside my area of expertise, but I personally doubt it.
Can you give more information regarding quantum sonar? How does it work? How is it able to detect the true forms of USOs despite an apparent ability to mimic other crafts?
The quantum sonar arrays were developed in partnership with a couple of major defense contractors. Traditional sonar relies on acoustic reflection. These arrays were different in the sense that they combined advanced quantum sensing capabilities with traditional sonar to detect disturbances in both acoustic and electromagnetic fields simultaneously. The key advantage was their ability to detect objects even when they exhibited no conventional acoustic signature or cavitation. When these objects mimicked aircraft, they could perfectly replicate visual appearance and radar signatures. But the quantum arrays still showed their true forms, because the arrays detected disturbances in the quantum properties of the water itself that couldn't be masked. Think of it like an MRI seeing through skin to reveal bone structure. No matter what these objects appeared to be visually, the arrays consistently showed their base forms. That's how we were able to track them from emergence points at crush depth all the way to the surface, even when they exhibited impossible movement patterns with no acoustic signature.
So they are from another dimension. Are they biological or something beyond the flesh?
They demonstrated mastery over pressure differentials and electromagnetic fields in ways that suggest advanced technology, not interdimensional phasing. When they altered their form to mimic aircraft, the base structure remained unchanged in our quantum acoustic readings. This suggests technological camouflage rather than any kind of dimensional shifting or organic transformation. In my opinion, all the data pointed to advanced engineering, not supernatural or biological phenomena. But there were people in the project who believed the latter.
It seems likely that there is another intelligent civilization operating from within our planet. Humans have been around for hundreds of thousands of years, so it makes sense that highly advanced human civilizations have existed before. As to why they're underground, it's possible they left the surface to escape a cataclysm and became adapted to their underground environment to the extent where they no longer wish to return to the surface. This all lines up with other discussions on here about a breakaway civilization existing which is roughly 500 years more advanced than we currently are. With that in mind, it's clear that they're returning to monitor the surface with all that's been going on recently between nuclear weapons and environmental destruction. But the rapid increase in frequency of sightings is alarming, especially considering the concentration around military bases and nuclear sites. If they were to make themselves known, they would need to know all countermeasures which could be used against them, as we'd probably blow them up without knowing their true nature given the chance. But what's all this in preparation for? Are they getting ready to save us from ourselves? It's intuitive that they would want to protect the planet they live on. If they were to take control and stop the destruction of our environment, our current way of life as we know it would be gone. Without energy production as it is, entire supply chains would fail, and billions would die. With artificial intelligence progressing how it has been, it's only a matter of time until we develop the technology necessary to be on par with them, at which point they could no longer stop us from destroying our planet. I hope I'm wrong, but it seems there's a massive intervention coming which will be necessary, but painful to say the least. But what do I know? Nothing ever happens.
I understand the skepticism and some anons wanting more from me, but let me break down exactly what we confirmed through the sensor data and documentation during my time in the program. Two consistent physical forms for these objects, the tic-tac and perfect sphere, that remained unchanged regardless of visual appearance emergence patterns from specific depth zones, sharing identical electromagnetic signatures, movement capabilities that violated known physics. Zero aggressive actions documented. Marine life shows no reaction to their presence. We identified systematic coverage of military installations, critical infrastructure, and population centers. Perfect mimicry of conventional aircraft while maintaining their base quantum acoustic signature. Exponential increase in emergence frequency, from about 15 a month in 2014 to over 40 a month by late 2022. This is what I can 100% confirm. The rest is speculation, theories, and/or my opinions.
OP, we've already had UFOs emerging from ocean LARP. Give us something juicy, drop some insane theories and baseless speculation.
Here's one that was popular among a couple of our guys. The object's quantum signatures showed what we called temporal inversions. Essentially, our arrays would detect their signature milliseconds before the objects actually appeared. At first, we assumed this was an equipment error, but it was consistent across different arrays and threshold points. Due to this, some believed the objects weren't just moving through space, but time. The threshold points weren't just spatial coordinates, they were temporal nodes of sorts. This would explain why they could move without cavitation, their perfect predictive movements, why marine life never reacted, and the exponential increase in activity. We're seeing the same objects multiple times as temporal loops multiply. They could be cataloging changes between different time periods. Each emergence event was basically a temporal snapshot of human civilization.
What about the Hudson Valley Trench?
The Hudson Valley area isn't comparable to our confirmed threshold points. The deepest parts of the Hudson River Valley and surrounding continental shelf only reach about 100 to 200 meters. The threshold points we monitored consistently occurred in zones between 3,000 to 4,000 meters deep. The Hudson Valley area simply doesn't have the depth conditions we associated with emergence events. Even the deepest parts of the New York Bight only reach about 2,000 meters.
Nice LARP. Actually decently written, but unfortunately, you can't make the claim that they aren't ET. have been here for a long time, or are reaching a critical threshold, whatever that is supposed to mean, and how you would experimentally determine what even that is without understanding what they are. Finally, there is no way for you to make that determination as to what they are doing, such as mapping shit out. That claim just comes way out of nowhere, as if you're able to read these things' minds.
The non-ET determination comes from quantum acoustic analysis. The objects show specific adaptations to Earth's deep ocean physics. They utilize pressure differentials and water density gradients in ways that wouldn't make sense for craft designed for space travel. It's like finding a submarine with gills. The engineering was clearly made for our oceans. The critical threshold isn't mystical. It's basic mathematical modeling. When you plot emergence events over time, you get an exponential curve. Example, 2014, average 15 events a month. 2018, average 25 events a month. 2022, average 40 events a month. Last projection, trending toward over a 100 monthly. This is verifiable data from our sensor arrays, not speculation. As for mapping behavior, we're not reading minds, we're doing pattern analysis. Example, object emerges from Puerto Rico Trench, follows precise grid pattern over Norfolk Naval Base, hovers at consistent intervals, maintains exact distance from key facilities, repeats pattern weekly with 99.7% consistency. Multiply this by hundreds of tracked events over a decade. When you overlay their movement patterns with infrastructure maps, the correlation coefficient is astronomical. This isn't interpretation, it's statistical analysis. The conclusions follow the evidence.
So you really never came across any other shape besides a tic-tac and cube? There's sightings of many other shapes, but you never saw any of them?
Just to be clear, we tracked spheres, not cubes. Never saw a cube. Oblong spheroid, the tic-tac shape, and the perfect sphere, typically 5 to 8 meters in diameter, were their true form. Any other shapes people report seeing could likely be the result of their mimicry capabilities, or simply an incorrect depiction of the sighting. Did we try to communicate or fight those things? Our military has encounters with them fairly regularly. The Pentagon videos just happen to be the ones that went public, but there's an extensive catalog of footage. Video, images, audio, sonar, thermal, radar, etc. that never will go public. At least not yet. What's interesting is that some footage online is actually legitimate. You know how one of the Pentagon videos that was confirmed to be legit had been floating around on a UFO forum since 2007? Yeah, there's a lot of real stuff already online. Don't get me wrong, most videos and images are bullshit, but I've seen a lot of footage that shows what I would consider similar base configurations and movement patterns we tracked, especially since New Jersey got hot. The really compelling stuff never leaves secure facilities, for the most part. Also, as far as I'm aware, we never had any successful two-way communication or controlled interaction. How much does Congress know? Based on the internal fights I witnessed, different committees probably have different pieces of information. The recent public hearings barely scratch the surface. Any advice for the general population? Keep calm. We can't stop whatever is coming, so there's no point in panicking. Do not live in fear.
Have you heard of them popping up around Svalbard? I don't really like the idea of them messing with the seed bank there, or really any seed bank. We always think military when we think of important infrastructure, but seed banks are immensely important too.
Your point about the seed vault is interesting. Our data showed these objects had a particular interest in what we called critical sustainability infrastructure. Not just military installations and power grids, but also research facilities, environmental monitoring stations, and yes, preservation sites.
Answer us, Larper. Is it related to the manufacturing facility thread?
As far as I can tell, no. I have no information about an actual manufacturing facility. The threshold points we monitored weren't structures or bases. They were areas of localized physical anomalies. The quantum sonar arrays would detect a buildup of activity before emergence events. First, we'd see localized magnetic anomalies forming in these zones. Then the seafloor topology would start showing that characteristic smoothing effect in a perfect circle. The electromagnetic disturbances would gradually intensify over several hours or even days, until they reached what we called a resonance point. When an object emerged, it didn't just appear. The arrays would detect it rising through different pressure gradients, maintaining constant velocity despite the crushing depths. Again, no cavitation, no acoustic signature, just smooth transition through the water column. The threshold points would remain active for varying periods. Sometimes single emergence, other times multiple objects would use the same point over several hours before the zone would return to normal. By 2022, we were seeing multiple threshold points activating simultaneously, which had never happened in the program's earlier years.
Technology far beyond ours. They still need to fly a bunch of vehicles around taking pictures like a Google Maps van.
The fact that they maintained perfect positioning relative to key infrastructure points while phasing through different electromagnetic frequencies suggests this was far more sophisticated than just taking pictures. But keep believing they're just high-tech Google vans if that helps you sleep better at night.
This whole thread is, we know what everything does, we don't know how or why it does it, and this is its intentions, even though we don't know how or why. Cool. Sure thing.
We spent over a decade collecting hard sensor data, and we had contact with other teams studying the project, but most of the info they had was heavily compartmentalized. Our team focused specifically on quantum sonar analysis and pattern tracking. We'd occasionally get sanitized intelligence reports or cross-reference data with other branches, like with our bio team, but most info was need to know, especially towards the end. I don't claim to know their intentions, never did once.
The interdimensional is the intra-dimension that is the inner Earth breakaway civilizations. Also why Canada, Greenland is so important. Another Roman warm period.
The Arctic has its own deep water features that could potentially serve as threshold points, particularly the Fram Strait. There were reports of activity in that region, but my work on the program's quantum sonar arrays was primarily focused on our 3 confirmed threshold points. I did hear from colleagues that the Fram Strait was a hotbed of activity, especially during periods of significant ice melt. Russian research vessels were also active in that area. Would have been interesting to get our arrays up there.
Question. You said if they were following Earth's magnetic field, you'd see gradual changes in their patterns matching the pole's movement, but these objects followed completely different rules, meaning they are not bound to Earth's magnetic field. But you also agreed with the Reddit post stating that they can't leave Earth because they rely on its magnetic field to maneuver. Don't these 2 points conflict? Also, was the MH370 drone footage real?
There's no conflict here, but let me clarify the distinction. When I said they don't follow Earth's magnetic field, I meant they don't passively track the pole movement like migrating animals do. Instead, our sonar data showed they actively manipulate and generate their own electromagnetic fields. But this manipulation requires Earth's magnetic field as a fundamental medium to work with, like how a jet engine needs atmospheric air to generate thrust, but isn't constrained to follow wind patterns. The objects can move freely against or across Earth's magnetic field lines, but they still need that base field to interact with. That's why we believe they can't leave Earth's magnetosphere, not because they follow the field, but because they need it as a medium for their propulsion system to function. The quantum arrays showed their technology is specifically adapted to work within Earth's electromagnetic environment, even though they're not bound by its natural patterns. Maybe. Based on our analysis, the physics involved suggests a theoretical possibility of large-scale field displacement. The arrays detected what we called quantum field bubbles around these objects. So basically, zones where conventional physics temporarily cease to function, similar to the threshold points but somewhat mobile. In theory, an object generating these effects could extend the field to encompass a larger volume. The quantum acoustic signatures we measured during actual aircraft encounters showed momentary phase matching between the object and aircraft electromagnetic profiles. By early 2022, we were seeing synchronized effects across multiple sites. Theoretically, this same mechanism could create a mobile threshold point around an aircraft, essentially treating it as an emergence event in reverse. Hope the explanation makes sense. Still, it's pure speculation based on our sensor data, but the physics suggests it's possible.
If this were true, why focus on America more than other countries? And why do it so slowly? Years gradually increasing just to do a Snapchat. The mostly focus on America is the weird part. If the whole world were looked at in a systematic way, then we could theorize about the invasion or the research hypothesis.
The temporal inversion data was just one theory explored to explain their systematic survey patterns. The millisecond precursor signals we detected before emergence events suggested possible temporal effects, but again, just a theory. Also, the focus isn't exclusively on America. That's absolute drivel that MSM, social media, and Reddit people want you to believe. Civilians see these objects everywhere. Don't get fooled, Anon. Research public data, you'll quickly see I'm correct. There's multiple countries researching this. US, Russia, China, who's been quietly monitoring activity in the Indian Ocean, and several European nations have deep water monitoring programs tracking the same phenomena. Most militaries have shitloads of recorded interactions with them.
2 quick questions. Cattle mutilations are widespread and have been reported for a long time. Did you ever track these objects going from the ocean to ranches? Second question. Do you have any knowledge of the supposed 2027 event that keeps being brought up?
On cattle mutilations, these objects were detected moving inland from emergence points, and yes, many of those times to rural and agricultural areas. There's a possibility they could be involved with cattle mutilation, but I personally don't have any data on that specifically. As for 2027, look, people love to pick significant dates. The exponential increase in emergence events we tracked through 2023 was already beyond our worst-case projections. For all I know, this could be the year they finally decide to go one step beyond observation and mapping. Don't buy into people pointing out specific dates. Nobody knows. That's why our government is scared and isn't sure how to proceed from where we currently are. These things operate on their own timeline.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.